For Cincinnati in the Goodyear Cotton Bowl, and number 2 Michigan faces off against number 3 Georgia in the Capital One Orange Bowl. Alabama defensive end Will Anderson surprised us all when discussing his team facing Cincinnati. Listen.
To me, I still feel like we're the underdog in this game. I mean, all year we have been disrespected. I'm pretty sure we're still probably getting disrespected out there.
Okay, let's welcome in ESPN college football analyst Booger McFarland. Booger, we got a lot of laughs on the show yesterday when we heard Anderson's quote, disrespected, they're the underdogs, because really they're favored in this matchup. But I want to ask you, how can Cincinnati manage to somehow pull off the upset against Alabama?
Well, first of all, I don't think they can. And if we're going to create a pathway, I guess you would have to start with turnovers, because turnovers are the great equalizer in football. Somehow their defense and special teams are going to have to make some plays, create some turnovers, get some sacks on Bryce Young. We've seen that offense vulnerable. I know we're all prisoners of the moment, and we all remember what Alabama and Georgia did in Atlanta and how explosive that Alabama offense looked. But I tell you to go back a few weeks and watch Alabama against LSU. Watch Alabama against Auburn. That offense was sacked over double-digit times combined in those games. And so I think you can get after the Alabama offense if you can attack their protections and get Bryce Young on the ground. But that's a tall task. I think Nick Saban's team is going to be laser-focused. And I respect the heck out of Luke Fickell and what they do at Cincinnati. But I just think it's a tall task for Cincinnati to beat Alabama this weekend.
Okay, well, let's talk about Bryce Young, the Heisman winner, coming off a stellar performance against Georgia's vaunted defense. Meanwhile, Cincy quarterback Desmond Ridder has put up stellar numbers this season as well. So which quarterback do you believe will have the bigger impact in the game?
Well, if you're Cincinnati, it's got to be Desmond Ridder. But I think it's going to be hard to go against the Heisman Trophy winner, Bryce Young. His poise, Charlie, is just outstanding. People marvel at the throws that he makes down the field, and they argue and marvel at how he's able to create and get out of the pocket. But for me, it's the poise that he plays with. For a kid so young, he never panics. And I think that's the one thing that if you're a young player out there and you watch this game in Dallas, just watch Bryce Young. Watch how he never panics. The moment is never too big for him, and he always stays calm and makes the right play. Now, on the flip side, if you're Cincinnati, we've seen teams beat Alabama before, not only this year but in the past, and your quarterback has to be dynamic. That guy has to be a playmaker, a dual-threat guy. Think Johnny Manziel, a guy that ran the football, make throws down the field. If your quarterback can be dynamic and do that, but most importantly not turn the football over, then your team will have a chance.
Okay, now let's focus on the Michigan-Georgia semifinal matchup, the quarterback position, something everyone's really been examining. Georgia's Stetson Bennett has led the Bulldogs through most of the season, but he did struggle in their loss against Alabama. So how confident should Georgia fans be with Bennett leading the Dogs against Michigan's defense?
Well, I think it's a defense that if you ask Kirby Smart in his heart of hearts, I think he feels like he can run the football against Michigan. And because if he can't, he's going to have to turn the ball over to Stetson Bennett and throw the football. And I think all of Dog Nation is kind of terrified by that. I look for Georgia to come out and try to establish the run with White and Cook and get back to playing Georgia football, the physicality at the line of scrimmage, controlling the middle of the field with Bowers. If they can do that, now they can throw the football when they want to throw it. And when you can do that, your quarterback is way more comfortable. And I think that's the game plan that Georgia's going to employ. But right now, everybody in Dog Nation, Charlie, they are thinking about the guy that played against Alabama and how he looked outmatched. Stetson Bennett looked like the moment was too big for him. He didn't look quite like Ian Book for the New Orleans Saints Monday night, but it was pretty close. So, yeah, exactly. And so if you're the Georgia faithful, you got to hope that the run game can get going, because then you can dictate and control tempo, and now all the Georgia faithful, including one L. Duncan, will be a lot more comfortable watching that game.
Oh, yeah, shout out to L. Definitely would be more comfortable. Now, Booger, both of these teams known for physicality, specifically Michigan's rushing attack facing off against Georgia's celebrated front seven on defense. So which squad, Booger, has the advantage when the Wolverines offense takes on the Dogs defense?
Well, to me, if you're a lineman like myself or Swagoo or Jeff Saturday, to me, this is what you come to see. A team in Michigan that won the Joe Moore Award, which is given to the most outstanding offensive line in the country. So they are really, really good. When your coach is Jim Harbaugh and you major in running the football, your offensive line better be good. But think about what Georgia does best. I mean, Jordan Davis is 6'10" and 380 pounds. Like, it's tough to move him. He's one of the best defensive players in the country, and he's anchoring a run defense that nobody has ran the football against. So when you talk about styles making fights, think about the Michigan offensive line, who's regarded as the best in the country, against Jordan Davis and that defensive line and that linebacking crew of Georgia and Nakobe Dean. To me, I don't want to see any other side of the ball. I'm going to have my popcorn ready when Michigan has the football. And I would tell you, put the women and children in bed, because the men are going to step up, and it is going to be a dogfight in those trenches.
Ooh, a dogfight. We love to hear that. Okay, Booger, we cannot wait for Friday. Should be a very exciting game of a couple exciting games of football. And we want to thank you so much for joining us here on First Take ahead of that.
Anytime. Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
All right, and it is the debate that never ends on Twitter, especially on this show. Who is the real best basketball player in the world? That is not what we're showing right now. We want to talk about who has the best 1-2 punch. Is it Rodgers and Devontae Adams, or is there someone different? And also, we want to pay tribute to a legendary career of John Madden, passing away yesterday at the age of 85, coaching the Oakland Raiders for 10 seasons, having the most winningest career as a coach in that time span, and just doing a lot of great things throughout the course as a broadcaster, also the face, the name.
You know, Marcus, he was so much more than football, and people think of him as the big guy, and he's, in the commercials, he's coming through with the wall and doing all that crazy stuff that he did, and he loved that in the commercials that he did, and he knew football inside out, obviously. But I think back to all of the great conversations that I've had with John, and the dinners and the lunches and the breakfasts, where we talked about everything but football. And I think the one thing that a lot of people don't know about John is he was close to being a Renaissance man. He was interested in everything. He was extremely well read. He would go around the country in that bus, and we call that flyover country. And for those of us who live on either coast, you fly over the rest of the country. John drove through it. Mm-hmm. John would go to coffee shops in Kearney, Nebraska, and in Goodland, Kansas, and he was accessible. And he would sit with the people, and he'd laugh with the people. And so many people around the country have said, we just shared this fantastic experience with this larger-than-life man who would get off the bus and engage us in a conversation for an hour. So I think of John, and I think of John as a guy who observed everything. He was very curious. He was very interested in everything that went on around him. And to me, those are the best of the memories for me.
Yeah, you called him a Renaissance man. I was wondering what of those interests is like most surprising to you. What was the title of the book that you were shocked that he was reading, or something that he brought up that you were like, what?
He would read everything. I mean, newspapers, magazines, books, you name it. And of course, once we got to the internet, that as well. But John would just he would just focus on whatever was in the moment at that time. What was the big thing in the world or in the country, and he could discuss it. But also, Dominic, he was a great listener too. He loved to listen to people, to get engaged in the conversations with people, to hear other people's point of view. The first time I met John was, believe it or not, back in 1975. I did some regional games for CBS that year. One of my games was New Orleans at Oakland. And I was doing the San Francisco Giants at the time, living in the Bay Area, went across the Bay, met with John in his office, and we talked about football for a few minutes. And then we talked about Travels with Charlie, which was the classic Steinbeck book, where he travels across the country with his dog. And John said, this is something I'd like to do someday. So I'm not sure John put the dog in the bus, but John lived Steinbeck's dream.
Well, Al, it seems like you have so many great memories with John, but is there one in particular that really sticks out in your mind, something that you'd say would define your relationship with him?
Charlie, there are so many. He had a fantastic sense of humor. He was so curious as to how things worked. And one night we're having dinner in Green Bay, and I don't like any vegetables at all, but I love broth, and I love croutons, and I love cheese. So we're in a restaurant in Green Bay, and I order French onion soup without the onions. which of course John now broke into a belly laugh, and then had to bring the chef out because they actually brought it to me, and he had to know, how do you make French onion soup without the onions? And only John could make a whole scene out of that. It was like something out of Seinfeld.
Oh my goodness.
Hey, listen, man. Hey, I know. Like I've been a guy that people talk about. Like you just crazy. Like you out there. You do things sometimes that nobody understand. And I think what encapsulated John Madden, especially in the booth, because to be honest with you, Al.